the healthcare workers on the front lines, those that are sacrificing their lives and their own health every day to be on the front lines of fighting the coronavirus. And I also want to extend love to each person joining us. I'm imagining there isn't a person in the world that hasn't been affected by the pandemic in some way. But to those of you who have relatives that may be sick, perhaps you yourself are sick, or perhaps you've lost a friend or a loved one, we just want to really honor those people today. We have a wonderful and rich panel joining us today, and I'm going to hand over to our exceptional moderator, Sarah Taub, to orient us all and kick us off today.
Hi, Caroline. Thank you so much. I'm Sarah with Center for a New Culture, and Caroline and I were having a conversation a week or two ago and thinking of what to do. And I said, why not have a panel conversation? And Caroline took the idea and ran with it and asked me to moderate. So I'm really happy to be here. And I'd love to allow our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. I'll be calling on people, but if you want to go first, feel free to raise your hand. Let's see. William, would you like to start? This is like an up to 2 minutes, like a little speech about who you are and what you do.
Hey everybody, excuse me. My name is William Winters. I am the founder of Bonobo Network. We are a sex positive community. We bring folks together who, understand that monogamy isn't necessarily the right choice for everyone, and that pleasure comes in many different packages. To create a sort of safe container where we can explore the gifts of pleasure and also have a really deep experience of connected community grounded in values of consent and inclusion and autonomy. It's been around for about 10 years. We've mostly been kind of underground in the Bay Area, but this year has been our big coming out party, and we'll be doing even more of that in 2021.
Thank you. And William, for the next time you talk, you're a little quiet. So if you can somehow speak up or come closer to your mic, that would be awesome. I'm going to call on Midori next.
Hi, y'all. Let's see. This is about a little about me, right? Let's see. I am a sexuality educator, and I run a production company that does weekend intensives such as Fort FM, Women's Dominance Weekend Intensive, Rope Dojo. I have been teaching in person. I guess we'll talk about before and after COVID in a moment. I've been teaching in person for 25 years now. How time flies. So I'm going to leave it at that and save some time for later. Next.
Awesome. Maybe we could go to Caroline now.
So my name is Caroline Carrington. I'm currently based in the Bay Area, but moving quite soon to Baja. More about that later. I am a certified Neo-Tantra educator, inspiring people to get out of their heads and into their bodies to connect more deeply with themselves, their partners, and the divine. I play around in lots of different communities, and I love to be a bridge builder between communities. And we'll talk about my orientation later. But I'm also flying my woo flag pretty high here today, and I see Midori nodding. And I hang out in like the Bhakti yoga and classical tantra communities as well.
Thank you. Marcia, would you go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Marcia Bachinski. I am a relationship coach, sex educator. I work primarily with women and people who love them. around communication, asking for what you want, boundaries, figuring out what you want. And I work with a lot of people who are interested in sort of non-traditional relationship structures and or sexual practices. So I hang out with a lot of these folks because I refer a lot of clients to them. And yeah, I guess we'll get into like what we were doing before and after, but I just want to say as we're kicking off, like I'm really excited to have an opportunity to talk about business models and how to sort of take what we were doing and survive, because I think that the work that we're all doing is so important and the world really, really needs it. So I just want to do a shout out to everybody else.
Fantastic. And then last but not least, Reid.
Oh my goodness. Well, first off, thank you for putting this together, Caroline. I really appreciate it. My name is Reid Mihalko. For folks who are meeting me for the first time, readaboutsex.com is my main website, REID aboutsex.com. And I do all kinds of things, mostly helping, humans have less shame and healthier sex and better communication in their relationships. And also a lot of what I do is helping other sex educators and sex positive professionals get better at the ideas around business and dating your own business model and not creating a career that's going to weigh you down and eventually just burn you out.
Thank you. And I think I'll just say, I'll put in a sentence or two about myself and what I do. So I organize events with my creative team at Center for a New Culture and Network for a New Culture. We put on events that ask the question, how can we live in a world without violence? And so we do a lot of teaching of community skills, communications, healthy relationship skills, boundaries, clear communication, what to do with emotional reactivity. We're a touch positive and pleasure positive and sex positive community. And we teach about consent, and generally we're interested in what is underneath whatever is bubbling to the surface, and how can we go to the root of what is pitting people against each other to see if there's common ground to be found in mutual appreciation. So now we're going to do a second go around, and in this one, it's an opportunity just to share a little more about some identities that you hold that you'd like to let us know about, demographics that you serve, any particular sex positive communities that you're involved in or especially serve, for example, LGBTQ, kinky, any other identities you want to put forward or speak about. Let's see, do y'all like it to go in the same order so it's predictable, or do you want to be surprised? Be surprised. Okay, I see 2 votes for surprise. Let's start with Marcia then.
Okay, I am surprised. All right, so yeah, who do I work with? Communities I'm involved with. So I'm a white woman, queer person living in the Bay Area, and the bulk of my work is really working with women and I would say non-men, even though I do have some male clients, around how to really get in touch with your desire, how to ask for what you want, how to figure out what you want, how to say no to what you don't want. And that work has really led me to some like interesting corners and eddies of the sex positive community. I feel really lucky to have spent time in the kink community, the tantra community, the LGBTQ communities, I would say, plural. And in terms of what communities I'm involved with, I'm very involved in the play party community here in the Bay Area, Mission Control, Bonobo, Girl Pile, like there's a bajillion of them. We had a great panel discussion a couple of days ago with some of the leaders of those communities, and it just was like kind of nice to see some of the familiar faces. I really feel like one of my core communities that I am involved with on a personal level is this sort of community of leadership around building sex positive community, or building a sex positive world that's grounded in consent and learning about our bodies and learning about how to talk about the things that, you know, there's a lot of shame and that can be really edgy. So I have found that to be, you know, my life's calling is to foster sort of more ease around things that can feel really hard to talk about or really edgy. And I just find it to be really fulfilling. And like I said, you know, I really enjoy working with folks who, you know, maybe they don't have as much access to resources as a more mainstream person might have. So yeah, I'll just leave that there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll let you, I'm going to say who's next and who's on deck, so you won't be so surprised, I guess. So next, I'm going to go to William and then Caroline after that.
Great.
And William, it looks like you just became the only spotlit person.
Yeah.
Not sure how that happened.
Did you do that intentionally?
I might have hit something by accident. Sorry.
Okay. Well, so yeah, I am an African American cis man, straight, and I serve anyone who identifies as sex positive and who feels aligned with the values and practices that we put forth in Bonobo. I feel, you know, I serve anyone who's willing to sit through a 3-hour orientation with me and Misha, basically. If you can stand that, then then you too can be a Bonobo. So let's see. I also helped to create a community event called Express Yourself, and that is a play party for folks of color specifically, and that is a POC specific party, and that falls outside of the Bonobo umbrella.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll go to Caroline and then Reid.
I love hearing all about how you serve, William. That gets me all hot and bothered. Okay, focusing back on work. It's been 9 months of quarantining. Anyway, so as I mentioned, I focus, or the lens that I look through, we're gonna have some fun with this, right? Thanks for understanding those that are chatting in the panel. Yes, so I look through the lens of Neo-Tantra with all of my work, but I tend to upset a lot of people because I personally play in a lot of different communities. So I identify as a cisgendered, queer, white, sex educator and Neo-Tantra teacher who hangs out in circles that have classical Tantra as a focus. That's part of my personal practice. And, you know, sexuality doesn't tend to be the main focal point there. That's also true in the Bhakti yoga community. There's a heavy focus on devotion. For me, I weave devotion through almost everything I do, as much as I am able. And that includes when I go and hang out in a dungeon. You know, one of these things we're going to be able to do in the after times, as one of my friends calls it. So I identify very strongly as kinky, mostly submissive. And I love subcultures. I got very involved in Burning Man when I first came to the US. So when people come and work with me, I work with people of all genders, individuals and couples. And I'm really there to help people feel more empowered using life force energy. I'm speaking some woo, but using this, using our eros and our sexual energy as a means for accelerating both transformation and a deeper understanding of self.
Thanks, Caroline. I appreciate you for bringing a dash of woo. Over to Reid.
Oh, I see your woo, Caroline, and I raise it some silliness. I identify mostly as a jackass, but I identify as when I'm teaching and when I'm talking to people, queer, polyamorous, slut. I also identify as a sex geek, and a lot of the communities that I move around in are, for the most part, maybe to my detriment, are mostly sex positive, and socially activisty, even though I wouldn't consider myself as a social activist. But whether it's play party communities, polyamory communities, whether I'm working with sex educators, running certain events, talking about business and whatnot, for the most part, I business-wise, I'm very open about my private life, because a lot of what I'm modeling for folks is that you can be this slutty and people will still talk to you. You can be this dorky and people will still talk to you. And what I'm trying to do, and what I have the privilege of doing, is hanging out with really, really smart people and kind of like Vulcan mind melding with them and trying to get like what are the best practices and best lenses to be looking at life to leave the campsite better than you found it. And my areas of focus are around sexuality and healthy relationships. But then that also extends to like, how do we as sex positive professionals, how do we actually make a living in a time where Instagram is shadow banning, accounts, and now we're also in a pandemic. So for those of us who teach or, used to make a lot of revenue by doing in-person events, like how do we pivot and shift to teaching online and making our cameras our next best friend? And then how do you build connection and help people have more empowered lives when you can't be in the room with them?
Thank you, Reid. And we'll go over to Midori. You're muted, dear.
Oopsie. Okay. Can you hear me now? You should be able to hear me now. All right. So how I identify, I think I'm supposed to start with that. I identify as an artist and a creative, first and foremost. I am, let's see, looking at the list of what I'm supposed to say here. And I am a 54-year-old, therefore middle-aged, Japanese American, foreign born. Those things are very all important to me. And yeah, so in terms of the population that I serve, let's see. Definitely tends to lean towards people who are curious about creative living, since so much of what I do is actually focusing. If I were to just say I'm a sexuality educator, honestly, that's a lie, because what I'm focusing on is creative living and creative self-expression. And it just happens to be that sexuality happens to be the portal that I'm coming into from that. It's a really good sandbox. So I tend to end up teaching and sharing and coaching people who are eternally curious about doing things better and doing things more authentically. Yeah, that tends to be the sample I draw from. Tends to be a lot of, as Marcia put it, not men folk, because of my Fort FM program. In terms of my own personal community hanging out, tends to be queerdos, heavy on the kink side, but I'm not a one-trick pony, so I'm also easily distracted by shiny and interesting and new, shiny. Yeah, and this has been a really interesting period of pivoting, if it is indeed that I am exploring myself and sharing with others tools for creative self-expression. I should be able to deal with this, with what the world is bringing. Sometimes I step up to that and sometimes I'm not, and I'm figuring it out as we go with the support of my colleagues as I am looking at you all.
Thank you. So beautiful. And I also want to invite people who are here in the Zoom call. You can put your identities that you would like to share into the chat if you like. And I'll just share for myself. I'm white, cisgendered woman, middle-aged, raised Jewish. Let's see, what else fits into that? Oh, queer and yeah, and nerd, definitely a nerd. Okay, so now we're going to dive into some of the juicy part of this conversation. So this next go round is going to be about the model that you used before COVID, and then what changes you had to make during COVID, your pivot, what you're doing now. And afterwards, we're going to have another round of another couple rounds about hardships and hard choices and silver linings. So you don't have to fit all that in right now. Think in terms of like up to four or 5 minutes. And people are talking about disco squirrels in the chat. That is fantastic. Pardon me if the disco squirrels distracted me. And
relationship anarchists.
yes.
Whoop, whoop.
Fantastic. Oh yeah, I identify as polyamorous. I didn't say that. Yeah, where were we? The disco squirrel took my brain and ran off with it. Oh yeah, we'll go around about your previous service and business model and the pivots you've made with COVID. And let's see, is there anyone who'd particularly like to go first?
I can start.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Reid, and then we'll go to William after Reid.
Yeah, so I mean, pre-COVID, for like one of my events that I'm more known for in the sex ed community would be Sex Geek Summer Camp, which was a 5-day in-person retreat for sex educators to specifically work on business and to like network and just like go skinny dipping or do whatever you wanted to in the woods kind of thing. Like it was community building with the focus on business. And you know, like kind of weaving it into this year as the pandemic was kind of starting. Camp was going to be happening in a couple of months, and it forced me to make a lot of, I mean, hard decisions, but like to be a grown up and make grown up decisions about things, but also to try to figure out like how not to just cancel an event, but how to still show up and serve the community, and also the interesting business dilemma that we can talk about later of having outlaid a lot of money to fund the event so that there wasn't money to refund everybody or give rebates to ticket holders. So that's something later we can talk about, because I think problem solving that is a useful thing for people to work on. But mostly my revenue and my income would come from traveling about 2 weeks out of every month to teach and speak at different events, teach workshops and co-facilitate with other facilitators all over the country and in Europe. And then that all just went away. What I was fortunate to have already been doing back when Marcia and I were doing Cuddle Party, and I was starting to move over into doing sex and relationship stuff. I had already been doing a lot of teleclasses and conversations with other educators about how they were doing, their offerings for people, and just the conversations about like jealousy or whatever. So I was already doing a lot of digital stuff back then anyway. So when the pandemic hit, it was like, oh, well, I was already doing Facebook Lives a lot and reaching out to people using my camera to talk to folks and have interviews. And I already had a lot of online classes or in-person classes that I recorded and was selling online. So for me, it wasn't even much of a pivot. It was trying to help everybody else get up to speed on, having email captures and funnels and things like that. So the business portions of the in-person camp fit really well to, everyone needs to start paying a little bit more attention and getting better at virtual offerings. So we're actually going to run summer camp as virtual camp. And I love teaching things while we're doing them. So like teaching you how to run a teleclass while it's a teleclass feeds my nerd brain. So teaching people how to start understanding the digital approach to having a business and doing it in that format worked really well. And there wasn't a lot of learning curve for me. The learning curve on the back end was like, oh shit, like I don't have $30,000 to refund everybody's tickets. Now what do I do? Because I didn't have event insurance. And the event insurance I would have purchased anyway wouldn't have probably worked for COVID times anyway. So there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff, but the digital offerings was already something that I was very, very fortunate to have some coordination with.
Thank you, Reid. I love how you bring the meta in your teaching.
Thanks.
Okay, over to William, and then we'll go to Midori.
Hi. So, excuse me. Bonobo was primarily an events-based community and business, and even though my business partner Misha Bonaventura and I were putting a great deal of energy into the community building work, the only thing we were really asking folks to pay for was access to the events that we were producing. That is a recipe for burnout and under-resourcing and failure. And so at the beginning of the year, before the pandemic was the tiniest blip on our radars, we launched a premium membership program with the idea that, sort of combined with event revenue, we would sort of bring ourselves to a place of real sustainability in doing this work. And then, of course, COVID hit a few weeks after our first event of the year, and all of, or most of our event revenue just kind of flew out the window. And also, one of the biggest perks of joining our premium membership program, i.e. discounted access to our events, also went out the window. So basically, what we did when the pandemic hit was immediately move from sort of wallowing in self-pity to proactive orientation, towards service. And asking ourselves, how do we keep people feeling as connected and as resourced as possible during a time of just profound disconnection, where one of folks' major social outlets, actually not just Bonobo, all of folks' major social outlets were sort of taken away overnight, and we entered into a lockdown for at the time an unknown period of time. So I only have another minute left. Short story is that we basically just flooded the zone with opportunities for virtual connection. We started doing daily check-ins via Zoom. We started doing virtual play parties via an unnamed video platform. We started doing a weekly virtual happy hour. We used icebreaker.video for weekly mixers. We started up a weekly interview series with sex culture creators. We started a book club. We basically just created a ton of different opportunities for people to come together during the pandemic, and trusted that the community would sort of respond to and recognize the value that we were creating, and folks have indeed shown up in all kinds of amazing ways. And over the summer, we figured, okay, like really, this whole premium membership program like isn't going to be enough, and I think that we need to move from a premium membership model to a standard membership model, and like really just sort of like bake in the idea that they're like being a member of a community demands a certain amount of like reciprocity, a certain amount of like energy exchange. And that's a transition that we're in the middle of right now. And it feels really great. I should say, by the way, that Bonobo as a community is very concerned with equity and with access. And so, we also have plenty of ways for folks to contribute very little or even nothing if their financial circumstances demand it, because we understand that, this pandemic is hard, and, there is a real lack of political leadership that means that people aren't getting the resources that they need. So just wanted to presence that.
Thank you. Wow, that's so fantastic and inspiring to hear about. Thank you so much. We'll go, did I say Midori next, or and then Marcia? And wow. Yeah, I'm really moved by that.
How much time do I get? Like
4.5, 5 minutes, something like that.
Okay, great. All right, so the before times model, I relied on and enjoyed, and I dearly miss in-person teaching. That is my craft, is the in-person teaching, and in the ways in which people learn that are interactive and socially engaged. Not surprisingly, most of my artwork is also social practice and socially engaged. And I didn't really fully think about how I have two careers that are both around human engagement. I mean, I knew that, I just really didn't make the obvious connection. So the in-person teaching, that which is engaged and performative and experiential and immersive. And I love to travel. So every week I was on the road. Now it does wear and tear, but it also gave me a great amount of joy. So there's the fiscal, and my income was a bit of diversification on my income. So I've got the larger weekend events like Forte Femme and Rope Dojo. There's the events and events such as Dark Odyssey and the Fetish Fair Flea Market would hire me to present. So I would present for other organizations, which would then pay me. I also have some book royalties. I need to write more books. I haven't written books lately. Yeah, I think sourdough is easier than book writing. Anyhow, just saying, okay? And let's see, so book royalties, a certain amount of affiliate income, the direct teaching of events that I organize myself, or being plugged into other events and hired by other organizations, and a small amount of personal coaching. So I've got that going on. So there's a little bit of diversification. I was running myself a bit ragged, but finding other benefits to it, emotional benefits to it as well. And then it was the weekend of March, New York Forte Femme, and I was getting to a point of doing Forte Femme, my women's intensive, every month between New York and San Francisco. So I'm flying back and forth. March 13th, I'm supposed to do a Forte Femme, and that afternoon I had to send out, we as a team made a decision for cancellation. God, it was hard. And the refunds, and no, my event insurance didn't cover this. I also had facilities and overheads. And I start to look at all the events that I have to cancel, and immediately $30,000 in the red. Overnight. because I'd already invested in like 8 months, and I've gotten to a point in the success of my program that I've got 8 months planned out, and overhead and rentals laid out in advance, right? $30,000, bam. Stunned, I come home and I go into a period of intentional dormancy, where I let my fields go fallow. I made this decision to, instead of rushing to take my actual classes, my physical classes, and immediately translating that directly to online, because unlike Reid, I don't have a lot of experience with online. Oh, I forgot to mention, also, I'd already had a Patreon account that I've been working on for 3 years before that, on my artwork. Slowly happening, trickle, 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 trickle. Okay. So I decided to not take all my classes and immediately turn it into digital, because how do I take this intangible stuff? And I would rather let it rest than provide a crappy product and affect my reputation and my product negatively. This is going to be the ultimate marshmallow test for both my students and myself. Here's the marshmallow, you gotta wait. In fact, I'm taking the marshmallow away, putting it in a Ziploc and putting it away. So it'll be fresh when we get it later. No marshmallow for you. It was a hard decision, because as I'm watching, people who are new to teaching attempt teaching online. And that was frustrating, because there is a craft and a skill to the pedagogy. And just because you can have a camera and you can string a sentence together does not mean you can teach. This is a craft, and there's a lot of heartache in it. So I decided to pull it back. And then I'm like, but my Patreon. And it's a forgiving place. And if anyone wants to know about how to get the most out of your Patreon, hit me up. I actually have a video about that. And I decided to turn my Patreon into a gym membership model or a library membership model, and making it accessible. So now I got that swatter coming up. So I've got the Patreon, and that has been an awesome pivot for me. It's been a compassionate, safe place for me. And I've been delighted in sharing that with others. So, all right, passing it on.
Awesome. Yes, I didn't tell other people, but I hold the fly swatter of timeliness. So when you see this, it means, finish up. Wow, that was amazing. And I haven't yet had the privilege of going to one of your classes, Midori, but now I really want to. Okay, we're going to Marcia and then Caroline.
And yes, you do want to go to Midori's classes. They're fantastic. All right, so pre-pandemic, my business was about, I would say, 40% online, 60% offline, in-person events, some travel, some local. I had private coaching clients that I work with virtually before the pandemic. That is continued, but I'll talk about that in a minute. I had an online coaching group called the Good Girl Recovery Program that I would run every once or twice a year, that I had been wanting to tweak, which I'll talk about in a minute, what's come of that. I also had a small group 8-month program that called Unfinishing School that I had launched in 2019, and it was so fun, and it was a hybrid online offline. So we had monthly online things, and then we had 2 retreats in person over the course of that program. I also traveled a lot, did workshops a lot locally, ran monthly cuddle parties, and just kind of generally had a lot going on. The other thing that was going on for me prior to the pandemic is my mom died about 6.5 months before the pandemic started. So I was coming out of a year that had already had me back on my heels, and having to innovate a little bit with not necessarily being in the physical place that I wanted to be, because I was traveling back and forth to the East Coast to spend time with my mom in the hospital for 4 months. So it has been a really challenging thing. The other thing that happened was my housemate and I moved 2 days before shelter in place. So to say that the beginning of the pandemic was a really challenging time for me is a bit of an understatement. And I did precisely the opposite of what William did, and with not quite as much intention as Midori did. And I also kind of went dark. I was listening and I was continuing to work with the clients that I had. But it was just really challenging to figure out what to do. And I had a somewhat similar reaction to seeing like people just kind of showing up with half-formed classes, panicking. And I was like, well, panicking is not going to deliver a really good student experience, although I understand why people were panicking. You know, it was definitely a scary time. So I don't have judgment about that, but I knew that that wasn't the thing that was going to work. So I did a lot of trial and error, and honestly, had a couple of big wins this year, and some things that I couldn't sustain, because I'll just be really honest, and I know we'll get into, you know, challenges and hard choices in a minute, but my energy level, it was very hard for me to predict from week to week what my capacity was going to be. I did have some successes. I ran a class in May that I'm probably going to run again soon, called Getting Your Touch Needs Met in the Time of Social Distancing, which people can download a copy of and work their way through it. From that, I had a practice for a few months called Touch Lab, where people could play with touch solo, and that was a big hit. But when then the fires hit in California, which not everybody's in California, but we also had 2 months of the air being on fire, and my entire body was just kind of in a permanent fight or flight state. And it was just very challenging to focus on anything. And of course, the political situation and the racial situation also were hitting me pretty hard. So, you know, it was really challenging, I would say, for myself to, you know, and the work that I do when I'm coaching people is it requires a lot of me to show up emotionally. I'm really like feeling into where other people are at. And I felt like my feeler was a little bit broken this year. So, you know, that was really a challenge. And then the fall came, and I normally do Good Girl Recovery in the spring and the fall. And I just had this thing, like the election was ramping up. Everything on social media felt really loud. And I just had this hit of, why am I trying to reach new clients right now when I could actually just be supporting people I've already worked with? And so I actually pivoted completely in September and ran a small coaching group just for people who had already worked with me. And it was a huge hit. And it had very little structure, to be honest. It was like, I was like, I can show up for these 8 people every week and hold a space where they can bring what's alive for them, rather than me trying to like guess. So kind of the 2 things that came out of it for me with my work, on the one hand, I was really lucky. I didn't have a lot of financial overhead, but I was going into this so emotionally depleted from everything that I had been doing, that, you know, it was really hard to get going. But I would say that the 2 kind of lessons I got so far are like really being intentional about how I try to show up to hold space. And then the other is to try to solve very, very specific problems that people are having right now in COVID times. And the touch thing seemed to be like a really hit for a lot of people. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. That's such beautiful intentionality. Thank you for sharing that. And finally, over to Caroline.
Thank you. Wow, I'm trying to like put my brain back into what it was doing more than 9 months ago. I'm like, what did I used to do? It's really interesting that a few years ago, I sat with a colleague and looked at whether we would, at the time we were working together, so whether we would take the Neo-Tantra school that I founded, called Sarasa Tantra, and whether we would take that online, because the reach is bigger, right? That's one of the blessings right now, is geography is, aside from time zone jumping, become negligible. And we decided against it because, just like Midori said, I want to be in a room with people. A lot of the work I teach also involves like energetic practices and understanding like quite subtle things that sometimes you have to be in the room to learn, and for your system to kind of feel into the resonance or the frequency of that. And you know, obviously none of us lay people would have predicted that this was going to happen. So my business focused around in-person workshops, retreats, hands-on private sessions. I work with a lot of trauma survivors as well. And I would say my private sessions were 50 to 60% of my business. And I was selling sold out retreats, sold out neo-tantric rituals, for examples, and my teacher training, which I've been running for a few years, and mentorship program to mentor hands-on practitioners. All of that was actually flowing quite beautifully. And I taught my last retreat at the end of February. I think we finished March 1st in Joshua Tree. I went to visit a friend as part of my self-care in San Diego. And by the time I drove back to the Bay, things were already starting to get sketchy. You know, none of us really understood this. And also the impact. I remember people starting to say how long this would go on for. And I was like, I remember when they said to us, oh, you're going to have 3 weeks. You have to be sheltering in place. I'm like, 3 weeks? How will I ever do that? And nowadays, if they told us we just had 3 weeks left, I would be jumping for joy. Anyway, like Midori, I had my entire year planned out. I had a pilgrimage to India planned to take people to my classical tantric teachers, to take people back to source traditions. I had sold out another 2 retreats, and I had workshops where people, they were already sold out months in advance. So I think what a lot of event organizers are aware of is that a lot of the work goes into the planning beforehand. And I had just laid out, I'd paid out all this, you know, I paid the caterers and the venue at my retreat. And I had all this money coming in from people booking packages for private sessions that now suddenly couldn't do that because it wasn't safe. And honestly, I freaked out, like it was not pretty. And I'm very grateful to a number of people on this call, specifically Marcia and Midori, who I've been leaning on pretty heavily in this time. But I kind of scrambled a little in the beginning, figuring out, like, for the rituals, like I knew I couldn't give them exactly the same thing. And I also couldn't, you know, that I'd sold them, and I also couldn't not run an event. There just wasn't, for people that don't know, most sex educators, we do this because we believe in the importance and the value of this work. Not that you can't make money in this, but if that's your primary motivation, you're going to get a big wake-up call and this work in the beginning. So, you know, I'm a single mama and I just had to figure it out. So I've been using an app. Oh, already. Okay. Midori, thankfully, she's been really supportive with this, helped me figure out Patreon. Some of my Patreon supporters are on this call, and I've pivoted to running most of my events on Patreon now. I feel like I'm really starting to find my groove, and I'm bringing other amazing people in. And, you know, I'll be able to start pivoting even the teacher training. We'll be able to start some of that and do the modules online. But I'm in full agreement that I didn't want to just throw anything at people because I really believe in the integrity of the work that I offer. So I think I'll pause there.
Thank you, Caroline. It's really amazing to listen to what all the choices that everyone's made. It's just was such a hard turn. I guess I'll just say really quickly, for me and for Center for a New Culture, of course, we also had to cancel a whole year's worth of events. And I dove into learning online facilitation and started putting our community processes into online mode. And we ran a whole 5-day online event in June, which was fantastic. And then after that, I kind of went dark too, like, okay, what am I being called to? I don't know what it is. And I've been called to just focus in with our residential community, our bubble of 10 people here out in West Virginia, and build community here. So I'm grateful for the chance to create that foundation. But definitely the revenue model, the events went out the window, and at least we could provide a space at our retreat center for people getting out of the cities and enjoying the woods, which we had a lot of. All right, so I would encourage everyone who, since we're people with bodies, to take just like 10 or 15 seconds and little embodiment break. Remember that you're not just a creature looking at a little box, but you're in a whole big world of your own. Okay, and coming back. So the next question up is about hardships and hard choices. And instead of assuming everybody's going to answer, although everybody might, I'm going to let y'all raise your hand, and I'll call on whoever's excited about answering. And think in terms of like 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes, and I will use the fly swatter of timeliness if need be. So I saw Caroline's hand already, so go for it.
Thank you. I'm being super eager on this one. I want to speak to the hardship because, as I referenced, going into this, I knew for me as a trauma survivor, the mental health parts of this have been the most challenging. And also to figure out how to pivot a business and stay in one's creativity when I was struggling with my own mental health challenges. And, you know, I live alone aside from when I have my son, has been very hard. After 9 months of this and like desperately waiting for the government to step in and do something, I've had to make some very hard choices, and I'm going to be leaving my son behind with his dad and moving to Mexico, which in my head, I'm like pivoting. I'm moving to Baja. I'm going somewhere quiet. And basically, I can live in Mexico for about, let's just say at least a fifth of what I can spend, what I have to spend in the Bay. It's probably more than that. But I just couldn't make it work. And the reality is, if people for my work need to come together in person and breathe and sound and touch on each other, I couldn't find a safe way to do that. I even had an outdoor retreat planned. And then it was like the logistics of, we're going to go to the Avenue of the Giants. And I'm like, I can't make sure that people, let's all move to Baja. Well, please don't all move to Baja because I want some space. But anyway, just in the Avenue of the Giants, I couldn't work out how to feed people, which is what I'd sold them safely. Marcia and I actually talked about it for a while, and I was like, I literally don't want the liability. So in Baja, I'm doing that to take care of my nervous system, to reduce my expenses, planning now that I may not be able to resume teaching in person until 2022. Hopefully it'll be sooner than that, but I'm just planning for the worst now because the worst has already happened. So hopefully it'll be better than that and I'll be surprised. But the reason I was so enthusiastic about sharing about this is like, it is hurting me to have to leave my son, who is a teenager that I love and adore, behind. And I'm doing that because I have to make hard choices in this time. And I want to be able to go and get out of the city. I live currently in Oakland, and there's been a lot of unrest. Thank you. And while I believe the protests are really important and I love the conversation that's happening, I already lived through the tearing down of apartheid in South Africa. So I want to go somewhere where I can manage to live in a way that's actually sustainable for as long as this drags on, and not have to put my students in harm's way to make ends meet.
Wow, Caroline, I just want to take a moment with that and leaving your home, letting your son stay with his dad, moving on, and just making this hard choice so that you can be in integrity and ethical alignment with the safety of the people you serve and the work that you're bringing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Who would like to go next? Okay, Reid. All right, Marcia then. The online dance. Marcia.
Sure, I'll go. I'll keep it as short as possible. I my heart goes out to you, Caroline. I mean, I know we've talked about this, but it's just I'm watching so many people be in a situation where they are basically stuck. They just have to make these incredibly challenging choices. Mine are not as heart-wrenching as that. I will say that the sort of biggest challenge that I sort of alluded to earlier was there's just been so much that has happened, especially those of us in California riding through more intense lockdowns than most of the rest of the country, going through forest fires, which I know Oregon also had to go through. And, just there's a lot of very specific to California challenges that have happened during the pandemic. The biggest thing that has been just incredibly challenging for me is I know myself to be somebody who has a pretty reliable sense of energy and a pretty predictable, I can usually sort of go okay, I've got this much capacity, and that sense of I don't know how much capacity I have. And having, I was doing weekly touch labs, almost like a weekly yoga, and I had regulars and people loved it. And then there hit a point in September when we couldn't breathe the air and it was orange out, that I was just I can't do this. I can't even say that I will be at a particular place at a particular time anymore. It's the flakiest of the flakiest of the flakiest is what it felt like at the time. And of course it was a very reasonable, reaction to the computer is not the whole entirety of the world, as you were saying. There is literally air I can't breathe. And the other thing I would say is kind of a big challenge for this is, a lot of my stuff is communication. It is, sort of verbal and a little bit heady, but it requires access to the body. And it's really challenging to be helping and supporting people around what do you need, what do you want, when people are just operating from the neck up all day long. And I've really struggled with that. I've been facilitating groups online for about 7 or 8 years. So this is not new to me. But doing all of it online is new to me, and trying to find ways to keep myself engaged, to actually support my clients and having access to their own feelings has been just an enormous challenge. I've found some workarounds, but it has definitely been one of the more painful, to be honest, parts of the whole thing. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure that's so relatable to so many people, not knowing what our capacity is going to be with these major, major stressors going without a clear end in sight. So thank you. Reid, I think you want to go next.
Yeah, thank you. I think the personal hardships for me echo in some ways what Marcia was saying, like having grown up in a chaotic family. When everything hit, I was oddly calm. Because I can deal with just a shitstorm. This is okay. And part of me as a, acts of service person for love languages, and also knowing that I had a lot of the digital offering part already set up, I could just focus on, well, let me help my friends and my peers, and here's a free course on how to make online courses, and I'll do difficult conversation formula parties so people can practice having difficult conversations with each other, because you have to have a difficult conversation with your roommate or whomever. so like there was a lot of free things that I could do because I already had money coming in, in little dribs and drabs. It's not the same as, traveling around teaching all the time, but also I wasn't traveling. So I've kept more money this year than I've ever had because I wasn't buying plane tickets all the time. And that was weird, but at the same time, like, I had no idea of how long I would last, like when the fatigue was coming for me. And then slowly it just felt like some weird dream where you're trying to get, you're running but you're just not moving. And then that burst of productivity and service that happened initially just started petering, and that was weird because I'm not used to that. And so then, and now, at least I know now, I am so many months into the unknown that if anything, I've probably become more gentle on myself with not being able to get certain things done. It felt like to me like I was in the car, the key was in the ignition, the battery was turning, but the car just wouldn't start. So I couldn't. I had no way of backing out of my own driveway to get anywhere. And I just had to kind of be okay with that. And then, I had a good week if I sent an email to all of my email people. And mostly what I shared was how much I was struggling. And so many of my followers just appreciated that because they thought they were broken because they saw everybody else still posting on Instagram.
Thank you, Reid. I totally relate to that initial wave of productivity and then a coming to a halt. Midori or William, would you like to share? Okay, Midori, hardships and hard choices.
Since I've already shared a little bit earlier, one thing that came up for me is I've had to let go of my assistants. So I had assistants for social media and other administrative things, as well as the teams that I've built for Fort FM, the project-based teams. I can't see them and I'm not working with them. I miss that collaborative, like, we got this done. And I miss having, I had scheduled social media posts and I had like great copy and all of that. And I miss my assistants. Oh my God. That's it.
Thank you. William, is there something you'd like to share?
I think that one of the really challenging things about the pandemic is it has been, we're really just like in the last couple of years transitioning the entire Bonobo project from being my weirdly intense hobby to being like a business that can like sustain one or two and hopefully more people over time. And I think that because people have been used to getting like, like basically like my labor for free and Misha's labor for free, except for when it comes to event production. We've had to do a lot of, sort of hard thinking and articulation about like what the sort of value prop really is and or what the value props are, of becoming a Bonobo member. I think another piece of it is just the fact that like even though we, as like the sort of organizers and leaders, have been saying for years, Bonobo is a community and not just a party. There's just the reality that a lot of people were coming to our events for, like for access to the party. And like the community was like a great added bonus that like made it like sort of more compelling than, other parties. But at the end of the day, when you take the party away, people are like, I don't know if I'm like really down for like all this like online shit and, this community stuff and, icebreakers and Zoom and so on. And so, we've been really trying to figure out like who is like really into the thing that we know we can offer. And one of the really edgy things is just knowing that like, we're gonna go from a Facebook group of 2,000 people to a group of, less than half of that, and that's just okay.
Great, thank you. All right, so now we're going to do another round of any silver linings, hidden blessings, unexpected blessings. And yeah, so like I'll just share for myself, one of them has just been slowing the fuck down. And another has been the ability to connect with anyone anywhere. And so there was a huge international component, and there has been going forward of all the online events that I've been creating, which was never there before. And I've made, anyway, good friends in other countries that I didn't expect to. So with that, again, raise your hand if you'd like to share, and I will call on you. And also think in terms of slightly less time than the previous share. Okay, Marcia, I saw your hand.
Yeah, +1 to the slowing down. I think for me, and this may be true for other people, but not being allowed to travel has really created space for me to reevaluate my reasons for traveling. I built my business. My mom had chronic illness for a long time. So I built my business so that I had the capacity to do what I did in 2019. And so the timing on the pause has been really kind of fortuitous in my case, that I can really think about what do I actually want to be traveling for? Where do I want my business to really geographically be focused? I mean, I'm still going to have online stuff even after this. And I also think another silver lining is just the general up-leveling of professionalism about our online stuff, and this more acceptance that, I think there was still kind of a bit of a hurdle for, especially sex-based stuff, for people to take stuff online. And now I feel like people are just like, well, my entire life is online, so I guess my sex life is online too. And I feel like that's opened the floodgates for some like really cool innovation in that space. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Who wants to share next? Reid.
Well, personal silver lining, Allison and I, for the 14 years we've been together, we've only really ever spent 2 weeks or 3 weeks at a time with each other because I would travel. So we, effectively being monogamous, we still like each other. We're the most sure we've ever been of our STI statuses now, ever, because we've only been with each other for more than 6 months. So those are weird silver linings, I guess. The other thing is I've gotten more new people coming to my workshops. That like the push that people had to find ways to connect online has been really good for me business wise. So that's been a silver lining, I think, and I'd like to think that a lot of people have been able to reach out and explored the virtual play parties we've been offering. People have come who never thought they'd come to an orgy because they don't have to leave their homes. Like, so I think people are learning and trying new things in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise. So those things have been really wonderful to help people Also, like helping other sex educators learn how to get better at teaching online is really fun, because to watch people grow and then start to find their confidence when this part of our businesses is so important right now, and I think will continue to be, that's been really rewarding too.
Awesome. Who's next? Midori.
Yeah, I wear this hat a lot. It drives the cats nuts. Silver lining. All right, so I mentioned about my art career earlier, right? I've been traveling so much that I would often say, oh, I wish I could, figure out how to do residencies, or, figure out more about how to get my art out there more and connect with other artists. Well, hey, I asked for it and the universe gave me the time. So I have been applying to a lot of residencies. I now have a editor that helps me with writing the applications, which are hard. Oh my God, explain my work. I can't just say, it's cool shit, give me money. So there's been that. So I've been focusing more on my art career and sharing that with my Patreons. And two, I've been getting in shape. I can now, do 14-mile hikes on a day and multiple days at a time. So those are a couple of silver linings. Before, I was too busy traveling to get in shape.
Awesome. Who is next?
Yeah, so I'm gonna get all woo again. Gotta throw that in amongst the seriousness. That some of how it's felt is almost like with a sieve or a colander. Things are getting shaken up for everybody in a pretty dramatic way, and we're getting the opportunity to really look at our lives and look at like what is working, what do we want, what don't we want. Marcia was very kind in encouraging me to evacuate at the end of August because the smoke was so bad, and I was sitting in my home with 100-degree heat, and I couldn't hang out with people, and I couldn't breathe the air, and I was like losing my mind. And it was that trip that actually gave me permission to go. Like I was trying to wait until my son was done with high school before considering leaving the Bay, and it just actually showed me that I sort of made it work with my business before, because I travel about every 2 months, not as hardcore as some people, but with a kid, that's a lot. So it's also giving me the opportunity to allow myself to ask for help. Thank you. I know. Thank you, Marcia. Yeah, I'm like die hard. I'll just figure it out all on my own, and I'll just endure and make it really hard for myself. And my patrons have been incredibly generous and kind. And then even just friends and family members, and then people online that have just really been amazing in the ways they've shown up. And then recently I made a pretty passionate post in a members only Facebook group called Tantra Not Trauma. And what they did, I was talking about sort of the ethics around teaching workshops in person right now, with the numbers in the US as bad as they are. California is literally the epicenter right now in the world for COVID-19. And it gave me an opportunity to connect. Thank you. I'm loving the fly swatter. Like, you better obey Sarah, otherwise you get whacked. I'll wrap it up by saying that I got the opportunity to connect with people like in the Netherlands and around the world that were also like crying out, going like, we've got to be responsible about this. And that's given me a lot of hope. So, and I get to move to the sun. And sorry, I'll just say this other thing. I'm having a hard time as a white person just noticing when us white folks just get on planes and go and visit a less fortunate country for a week and take our infection rates there and then come home. So I'm differentiating between people that need to actually move and are going to go there and invest in communities and take their resources versus let's just go on vacation, because I think that's quite irresponsible right now. Off my soapbox.
Thank you. And William, did you have some silver linings you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would say that in general, like nearly everything we have done this year has been like a version of something that we'd talked, like everything we've done this year in reaction to COVID, that is a version of something that we'd considered doing before COVID. And we were just so busy with the work of event production all the time, creating monthly parties for 200 plus people and creating various in-person events supporting the community. We just didn't have time to invest in creating the online infrastructure that we wanted and needed and that our community deserved. And so I'd say the silver lining is just getting so much done infrastructure-wise, getting so much just business planning done, and just having the time and space to do a lot of thinking about business model. That's been huge for us. And we're working with someone right now to get our tech stack completely set up and all the Zapier connections right, and our systems talking to each other so that we can be a mildly automated version of ourselves behind the scenes. And that's been really huge. And then the last silver lining I would say is just that we are more than ever becoming leaning into and living the fact that we are a community and not simply a party. And that is more real than it's ever been.
Thank you. I'm loving hearing all these silver linings, deepening into self, having time to go to foundations of business models, getting in shape, feeling support from around the world. Thank you. So there are just two more questions, and then we'll have space for Q&A if there is any. So the next question is around health advice. So the question is, where are you getting your health guidance as you're changing your business model? And if you have resources you want to drop in the chat or anything like that, great. And I'm going to go to Marcia first, because Caroline tipped me off that she's done a lot on this, and other people are welcome to share too. So go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, so I did teach a class on how to have a confident COVID bubble, to really know where your boundaries are, where your other people in your pod's boundaries are, what a pod even is, how to talk about this stuff, how to evaluate risks. So I did do a class on that. I'll drop the link in at the end, but I'm going to screen share here real quick a few things that I've been using that have been helpful. So obviously the first one for Americans is the Center for Disease Control. Go to their website. They have a giant thing that says learn more about COVID-19. And I have found that just for basic questions, this is actually a pretty thorough resource that's very accessible in terms of, what symptoms, when should I get tested? What's going on with the vaccine? What is can I quarantine? What's the difference between quarantining and self-isolation? The CDC website has all that information. The second thing that I've been going to is COVID Act Now, and you can put in your county, and I put in Alameda, so you can actually see what's going on locally. It's really easy to get wrapped up in the national news. A lot of us don't even have local newspapers anymore. I check this just about every day just to kind of see what's going on. this number here with the 48.8 is extremely alarming to me as somebody who's been watching this. But if you haven't been watching it, you can scroll down and see what's going on. And that's how we know that locally things are real bad. You know, we tightened our protocols up in August, my pod and I did, and we did get a little more relaxed when it was down here because it was safer too. Not wildly so, but seeing more people in the yard, that kind of thing. And now, you know, even before this line started going up, my pod and I have been looking at this and we've just been using that. So, you know, I'm not even using this for professional things because everything that tells me, you know, I'm doing everything online. I'm not doing anything in person. But this is a great resource for people who want to kind of evaluate risk. The next one is, this is like, if you like numbers, if you don't like numbers, this one's going to scare you. But you can put in where you live, you can put in activities and get a sense of how risky a specific activity is. It's called microcovid.org. I don't take this as the gospel, but I do find that when you're having conversations with people about how risky an activity is, human beings are terrible about evaluating risk. And the sentence that drives me crazy is, it felt safe. Like, what is that? It's not a feeling, y'all. I mean, in general, like, I don't know, whatever, like, we're really bad. It's invisible. How do you know if it's safe? So this pulls the data about what's going on locally in the numbers, so you can actually see it change over time about how much of your the thing you want to do might be risky. And then I'll say the last one that I like nerding out, and if you like nerding out on this stuff but you don't necessarily want to get bogged down in numbers and you're on Instagram, King Gutter Baby. Okay, now she's an infectious disease researcher down at Emory University in Atlanta. She's involved in a lot of things. Her Instagram stories, y'all, are fantastic for like, she explains a lot of things. She debunks things. She talks about what you should do. Like, this is her story on COVID dogs. Like, can you get COVID from dogs? What's going on with ivermectin? What's going on with the Pfizer vax? So it's a great resource. And that's kind of in the relative order of how into the details you might want to get. There's other stuff. I talk about some other resources in my class that's also available for download in the COVID boundaries class, or COVID bubbles class. But it is a really, you know, I've been really appreciating the people who are doing really good science education, because it's hard to really get it. The nuances of what's going on, especially because it's new, like the novel coronavirus. The information has changed. You know, we used to think we had to wash our hands and wash everything down, and now we know that's not a primary transmission vector. So, you know, it's also been really helpful for being able to give sex education advice. I've been finding some people have some very odd conceptions about biology, and like, they're like, well, can you get COVID from semen? And I'm like, how are you going to get close enough to someone to not share air? Like, are you wearing scuba tanks or something? The answer is there is no research on that, because they don't perceive it to be a very big area of concern. It is in fecal matter, however. So yeah, these are the things you can learn if you're really nerdy about it. And I'll just stop there, because I know I get really excited talking about actual science.
Marcia, that is so fantastic. Thank you for those resources. I knew about some, not others. The Micro COVID project is fantastic. I used it to talk with my 95-year-old father about, you know, why he should be spending less time in grocery stores and that kind of thing, you know. So thank you. Does anyone else have a favorite resource they want to throw in? I'm not planning to spend a lot of time on this question, but if there's one like, oh yeah, this one. And thank you, Marcia, for being all organized with them all in one tab and screen sharing, and wow, great pedagogical technique. Okay, go ahead, Caroline.
So I am not a numbers person, and I fucking love microcovid.org because it does the numbers for you. So I know Marcia already gave that information, but like you said, if you're a numbers person, I am not. Numbers like fly over my head and I don't really get them. but you're able to look at it through the kind of activity, and even things I thought were safe, it really helped me see, oh yeah, that's really not a good idea. I watched the Johns Hopkins COVID data every single day, because you can actually be telling in real time. They have like a 60-minute, I think once a day, or sorry, 60-second once a day snapshot of what's happening in your particular area. And I just find that really reliable. So I'll end there.
Thank you. Anyone else have a favorite one they want to toss in? Reid.
I'll put a link in the chat to, as I've been listening to, I consume a lot of podcasts, and I've been trying to keep a list of the ones that I think are really useful to help people start to think about risk, to understand a pandemic, and to also kind of wrap your head around emotional thinking versus like truly critical thinking. Because one of the things I've been trying to help people, who come to me for support is just like, well, go listen to these things, because you can hit pause anytime. And these podcasts, or like even Marcia's course on confident COVID bubbles, like these are not people yelling at you. Like they're helping you think and parse out, your emotional biases, and that, like Marcia already said, like this feels safe. Because my biggest worry is that like I have the privilege of, I'm self-isolating with Allison and our dog, and so I'm having some contact, but I'm also worried that there's like kind of an abstinence only education that's happening with some people around COVID, which is like, you should not be leaving your house. And that's not helping people learn how to figure out what their needs are and how to get, things met. And my other worry is that as we move towards vaccination, human behaviors will be like, well, most people are vaccinated, we're good, like we can go back. So like, because we're already starving, and it's like we're all going food shopping hungry. So like trying to help people figure out the emotional pieces to track, and also not shame themselves or shame other people, I think ultimately, helps. And, there's no perfect solution right now.
Thank you. Caroline, did you have another thing you wanted to throw in?
Yeah, just Reid, I know you're in Oregon, and I haven't been tracking exactly the rules in Oregon, but just to be mindful, right now California is in the strongest lockdown it's been in. We are being required to shelter in place.
Yeah.
So just in case, I know a lot of my audience is in California, like you actually do have to stay at home, and it fucking sucks. And as somebody who struggles with mental health, I'm not saying it is easy. I have struggled with my own mental health in this. It's not about shaming, but if we all make exceptions, then we're just making it worse. Our ICUs are at 0% capacity around the Bay in a lot of places. So I felt it.
Yeah. Thank you for that point. And so just to integrate those two things, developing the discernment of what can we actually do safely and what can we not do safely. And when things are at the point where they are in California, stay at home, with the stay at home order, stay at home. Okay. Any last things? I want to move on to our last question and then open for Q&A if there is. So
Yeah.
William, you have a thing?
Yeah, I mean, so I have been a really big fan of just like sort of listening to public health experts and epidemiologists. We hosted a conversation with one such person back in June in Bonobo as part of our Ask Me Anything series. I'm a big fan of Dr. Julia Marcus, who writes for The Atlantic and who shares a lot of ideas in common with what Reid saying about the importance of sort of learning good like sort of harm reduction practices and giving people like the information they need to make decisions that are going to reduce risk. I mean, you know, I certainly agree that like we are in like intense lockdown here in California. At the same time, they're like, but sure, IKEA can be open and Target, you know, I mean, you know, and so I think that like we really need to take into account that like even our government officials are making those calculations for us in their decision. You know, they're saying we're going to accept like a certain amount of risk for the sake of keeping the wheels of commerce turning, because like the federal government has completely failed to provide economic relief that like will allow us to like go into the full lockdown that would probably be somewhat helpful at this stage without people like starving, you know. So, you know, I mean, you know, despite the overall like, you know, sort of strict order, like actually still sort of think that people should also be learning excellent risk management and harm reduction techniques, and that's like the value of things like micro-COVID.
Great, thank you. And please feel free, if there's a specific person that you've been following, if you want to drop a link in the chat. I'm going to save this chat and I'm going to get with Caroline to make sure it goes to where the recording goes so that those people can access to those links also. Midori,
sorry, I forgot to add that
sorry,
I wrote an article, co-wrote an article on forming pandemic pods over the summer, and I'll drop that link into the chat as well.
Great. Midori, do you want to add anything, or
All
we can
been
go to the
covered.
next question?
Y'all are awesome. Everybody pay attention to all the links.
Fantastic. Okay, so the last official question on our very official question list is, what are some ways that people can support sex-positive professionals at this time? If you'd like to answer this, raise your hand, maybe think in terms of like a minute or minute and a half of your preferred ways. So
sex-positive professionals or us?
We'll get to the self-promotion and like, you know, I'm offering these things when we're done with the Q&A. So yeah, all right, William.
Yeah, I mean, so basically we live in a time when we are forced to do our business and commerce and communication online. And at the same time, our ability as sex-positive professionals to speak freely about the subject matter we are teaching and talking about, and sharing content related to sexuality is being threatened. It's being threatened, you know, partly by FOSTA and SESTA, which was like one of the first really big erosions of Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. You know, I think right now there is a really big push on Capitol Hill from both the left and the right, unfortunately. The left and the right, you know, to like repeal Section 230 and replace it with something that will like surely be worse unless like folks speak out. And you know, I mean, it's and the threat isn't simply legislative, you know. The threat is also Visa and MasterCard, you know, pulling out of Pornhub when Facebook is like one of the biggest purveyors of shitty, abusive content, right? I mean, so I mean, basically, I would say that like what we need as a community, one of the things we need is money. other thing we need is folks to write their legislators, call their offices, and let folks know that what has been happening around the illegalization of any sex on the internet is harmful, and that regular moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and so on actually want freedom and autonomy in communications, at the same time, of course, wanting to prevent the worst abuses from happening. Those things can coexist.
Thank you so much. And William, if you have any links to organizations already doing that work on the legislative front, or activism guides for this, please feel free to share. And please do share. Thank you for bringing up that key point. Marcia.
Yeah, I actually want to piggyback on what William said. I think one of the biggest things that you can do to support sex positive professionals is if you have, and this, not everybody has this capacity, but if you have the power and privilege that your situation is going to be safe enough, you need to come out as a sexual person that values sexual things. Marty Klein gave an analogy once years ago, I think it's in one of his books. If there was a bipartisan effort to punish people for driving Toyotas, Toyota owners would rise up en masse and be pissed off and be like, what the fuck are you doing? But because, and it's not just at the federal level, although we're dealing with a lot of federal issues right now, there's all kinds of things, zoning laws that affect us, ways that, where can we have our events, alcohol laws, those kinds of things all happen on the local level. For people who are in San Francisco, there is a William, I'm going to get the name wrong. What is it called? The sexual Democrat,
the San Francisco Sex Positive Democratic Club.
That one. So, there are political.
We should drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, there are organizations on the local level sometimes, depending on where you are. But, going to bat for people so that it's not just the people who do this for a living that are always having to go to bat. I'm not great at activism. I'm good at teaching. If you care about this stuff and you have any ability to be an activist or to just leverage the relationships you have with community leaders in your area to do anything to cut us slack, the world's going to be better off for it. And it is at the federal level. We are facing some specific challenges at the moment around that William spoke about, but it's not just at that level, making it so there's community spaces we can gather in, making it so that anybody who's trying to do sex positive, healthy, consent-based activities has a place to do it and has a community to do it and aren't being punished by their local governments for it.
Thank you. So very eloquent and so important. Who else has something to add? Ways that we can support sex positive professionals. Go ahead, Reid.
Yeah, I would add, if you're listening to this call, if you're watching this call, then you're probably a fan of sex positive professionals. But the ones that you really appreciate, share in the ways that you can that are good for you, that are congruent for you. Boost the signals of other educators, and specifically, if you can, boost the signals that allow the people that see you boosting them to follow them on social media and whatnot, but more importantly, to sign up for their email lists, just in case people are getting shadow banned and things like that. Because as a lot of our peers and colleagues struggle and maybe get their Instagram account or something taken down, seeing people signing up for your email list does give you some hope and does feel really good. And also, for those of you who have email lists, if you don't have an email list, educators, please reach out to some of us and ask us how we did ours and get something set up, because it really does help. But like, turn on your notifications. Not that you need more email, but that you can see that people are signing up. Like, it always makes my day. And hopefully that will give you a little bit more gas in your morale tank to keep going.
Thank you. And I just want to mention that William dropped in the names of the Electronic Freedom Foundation and Free Press as organizations working for this cause, and Midori put in a link which we will collect as resources. Midori, please share.
Okay, so all of what everyone else said so far. And the newsletter thing is very effective because many of these platforms will disappear at a moment's notice. We don't know, or will get disappeared off of them. Currently, Patreon's a place where a lot of educators hang out and are providing things. So check out the work of the creators, not just educators, but artists, there's that. I also have another thought. If you are eager to go back to the sex parties and the sex positive events, if your favorite events and organizers are not doing that as fast as you'd like to, don't push them. They are making a lot of decisions based on a lot of factors. Again, with the marshmallow test, all right? If it's, laid and dead is not a good look. Really, it isn't. Okay? So hold off on that marshmallow, all right? And so, yeah, if your organization is not hustling to that party as fast as you'd like, reach out and send them a supporting message saying, we miss you, soon as you're ready, but I know you'll let us know when you're ready.
And just to piggyback on that, because I know that this is something that people who run events really run into. If you really want them to come back, and I agree with Midori, don't be pushy, but do volunteer to do something. So it's not just like, I want you to come back so I can consume your event. Like, participate in them coming back.
I would like to piggyback on the piggyback and say, because this sounds fun, and say that the other really important thing that you can do right now is get vaccinated as soon as vaccines become available to you. Don't try to jump in line. Don't try to contribute $25,000 to the local hospital's medical foundation to try to get it early. But as soon as they become available to people with your risk profile, get vaccinated. A related thing that you can do, and we've done this in Bonobo, is really positively encourage people to do so and push back, ideally gently and lovingly, so that people can hear what you're saying, on the torrents of misinformation on vaccines and vaccination that are currently out there. So yeah, that's also just huge right now, because we won't come back, particularly, I mean, I'm sure this is going to be the case in California, the kinds of events that we do, until there is herd immunity, which means that we need 65 to 70% of the population vaccinated.
So important. I personally can't see creating an event until we have that level of immunity, and that means vaccinations. Caroline.
Sorry, just really quickly. So yes to Patreon. I know I've also had people go, on mine, you can subscribe for as little as a cup of coffee in San Francisco. And you can write a message just telling, one of the things I'm missing, one of my love languages is words of appreciation. And when I hear from somebody, oh, thank you for that thing you said 5 years ago, or this way you touch my life, or I just see you doing good work in the world. Because I know there are a lot of people hurting financially. Share, their articles. And I've also had people just one-off be like, I don't want to be rude, but could I send you some money on Venmo? Really, it's been so humbling, but it's also really meant a lot to me. So there are many ways you can support us, and sex educators really do need your love and support right now. It's been brutal.
Thank you. So I'm hearing appreciations, activism, patience, signal boosting, coming out to make it clear to legislators and community leaders that this is something that's needed. All kinds of amazing ideas. Thank you. Okay, so we have a few minutes, like 5 minutes or so, if there's any questions out there. I saw Midori actually wrote a question in the chat. That's the only one I've seen, which is there a good link for people to easily send a fax or a letter or email to representatives about Section 230 of the CDA communications? I don't know the whole thing, the name of that, but does anyone know, or will that be to research and add to the resources?
I'm looking at William.
Okay.
I don't know if William knows. But
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I was responding to a comment on Facebook.
Yeah, no problem. Is there a, sorry.
You have a link where we can get into the activism.
I know that. So one thing I know that Sunny Megatron has been doing a lot of writing and talking about this particular thing. So I would recommend following her. I strongly suspect that EFF is working. Electronic Freedom Foundation is working on the Section 230 issue. I said Free Press because they're like a progressive, sort of press freedom and internet freedom shop, but I don't actually know if they're actively working on Section 230 reform. Reid mentioned the Woodhull Sexual Freedom Foundation, which I think is totally right on. And then there's the Free Speech Coalition, which is the porn industry's group, which is typically, on the forefront of these things. But I want to just say once again that the fight is legislative, but it is also cultural, and we need to be fighting both of those battles. And so there's the sort of work with organizations, and there's the reach out to legislators, and there's also what Marcia said, the coming out and the claiming public space around your identity as a sexual human being.
Okay, so yeah, all right, so does anyone who is currently on have a question? Or if not, we're going to go to our closing round. Okay. This has been such a fantastic conversation. I really feel privileged to have been part of this. And so what we're going to do in closing is give each person about a minute to share upcoming events or your Patreon or, links. And I have links that I'm going to pop into the chat for the people who've shared them already. And so let's go first to Midori. And hold on, I'm juggling 5 different technological things here, but Midori, you're on. Tell us how we can support you and learn from you going forward.
All right. Yeah, what would delight me is if y'all would join my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Planet Midori. You can join as little as $2 a month. For the classes and stuff, it's $5 a month, but I provide rich content. Social media is all under Planet Midori. So, and I've got a bunch of cool classes coming up. Check it out.
Thank you so much. Who would like to go next? Marcia.
So I am producing a lot of, well, not a lot, but I'm producing a handful of targeted downloadable classes. I've got the Getting Your Touch Needs Met in Time of Social Distancing. I've got Build Your COVID Pod, and I have a more general class on boundaries. I also have a little friend who's come to visit. So you can find all of this on my website, askingforwhatyouwant.com, or my Teachable School. Also, please follow me on Instagram. Okay, that was bad timing to have the cat here. On Instagram.
No, the cat is good.
The cat is good.
They're lucky.
All of my social media handles are at Ask Marcia B. It's easy to find me online. And if there's something that you want, I mean, I'm doing coaching primarily right now. So if there's something that you're like looking for support on, both business and personal, please hit me up. I would love to support you.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Caroline, because I know I have Caroline's links that I'm all ready to pop in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, so I am available for video coaching, and believe it or not, I can teach full body orgasms, even on video coaching with your clothes on. So anyway, I can do that for individuals and couples. You can learn a little bit more at carolinecarrington.com. I'm running almost all my events through my Patreon because we're fostering community there. And I have I have 2 events coming up for the holidays. One's away where you guys get to interact a lot together. And like a holiday themed one. And then on December 29th, Ask Me Anything about kink, sexuality, neo-tantra, and spirituality. So please, and that's all going to be run through my Patreon. So yes, join there, and you'll and get on my mailing list, and it'll be an easy way to track what is happening when.
Thank you, Caroline. And I see that William has already put his links in the chat. Why don't you go next, William?
Sure. So right now, I think the best way to stay in touch is to follow the Bonobo Network Facebook page. We are about to launch a membership application process, and once we do, we'll make that announcement there. When you become a fan of the page, be sure to follow the page. We don't do many posts, but that'll ensure that like when we do post, it'll show up in your activity feed on Facebook, or you can shoot me an email, william@bonobonetwork.com, if you want to talk about coaching. I do sex and relationship coaching. I'm a somatica trained sex and relationship coach. And I also support leaders, organizers, and producers in building strong, healthy communities and really robust cultures.
Fantastic, thank you. And a question is I have for you. I mean, before COVID, Bonobo was really located in the Bay Area, but now that we've gone so much online, is that something that would be beneficial for people who aren't just in your area?
Yeah, that is one of the silver linings that I forgot to mention. It's that you know, we already had members across the nation and around the world, and that has just really picked up in the COVID times as people all over the place have wanted access to the kind of community that we've built over the years.
Fantastic. I know I'm going to go check it out right away. All right. And Reid, over to you. I see you've put your links in the chat too.
I will not be undone by William. Yeah, I mean, everywhere on social media, it's Read About Sex. So as like with Instagram and things that are going on right now with Sesta Fosta, like because I've got sex in all my social media, that might end up being the worst decision I ever made a decade ago. For those of you who are nerdy about digital stuff, send your friends, take a picture of that, and send your friends to go download the Difficult Conversation Formula, because this is something you can be doing on your Zoom calls, and everyone can pull. And you can say, pull out your phones if you're not on your phones. for Zoom, and then it will work. If you're a sex educator, yeah.
Reid, I'm just going to pause you for 1 second because we're coming right up on the top of the hour, and I just wanted to say, and I know Midori has to leave like right sharp. So
Oh, shoot.
if you need to go, Midori, please.
Yeah, cut me off.
Many thanks for
Midori,
being
you
here.
go. Do you want to say something, Midori? Say something.
Did you say I could cut you off?
Yes. I mean, not like that, but I mean, maybe like that, I guess. I haven't thought of it.
On that note, thanks for a fantastic.
All right. So Reid, go ahead and finish up now. We don't have to end sharp, but I just wanted to give Midori the chance to say goodbye if she needs to get off.
And for educators who want to just nerd out on online classes, I have a free Let's Make an Online Class that's been really useful for folks, so you can just kind of sign up for that. And like, you can do this kind of thing on your worksheet or on your workshops, because people, or if you're speaking at an online festival, and that can help people sign up for, you know, free resources or paid resources or whatnot.
Okay, awesome. And I'm just going to drop some of my links in the chat. I organize with Center for a New Culture. If you just love my moderation and you want to go to more events that I facilitate, you can go to cfnc.us, that's our website, or our Facebook group, Global E-List. That's where we're putting up on the Facebook group. You'll see our gatherings. We're having them about every month or so, and we'd love to see more people join that, ways to connect more deeply. So in final conclusion, I just really want to thank Caroline for organizing this, and for everyone on the panel for sharing. This has been so illuminating, and I mean, that's sort of a cliche way to end a panel, but really, I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you for bringing yourselves and your knowledge and your wisdom and your hearts, and thank you for being here.
And Sarah, thank you so much. People didn't really get to see quite how magnificent Sarah is. She's one of my favorite. Are you going to swat me when I'm really appreciating?
No, I'm just posing with my symbol of power here.
Oh, I was like, I just started. But yeah, anyway, Sarah's amazing and actually teaches people how to facilitate something called the ZEG Forum. Anyway, she's one of my favorite facilitators. I kind of got my dream team on this call. So thank you to everybody for being here and the badassery you are navigating the pandemic with. And I just love that we've all come on. We all have different ways we're doing this. And the idea was to offer this as a way for community to learn. So I know a lot of people have to wrap up. For those that want to join us for a little hangout afterwards, you can stay on the Zoom call, or you can join my Patreon, and the Zoom links are there. And I'll let Sarah finish it off.
All right. Well, thank you all. And I hope that everyone is empowered to keep themselves safe, be in their bodies, have pleasure, and connect with other humans.
Thank you.
So let's end the recording there.
Thank you. Thanks, Caroline.